thank the member for Fenner. The question is that the bill now be read a second time. I call the member for Longman.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise today to speak on the Appropriations Bill 2023. It gives me a chance to reflect on the contributions to the Longman community of the previous coalition government and to highlight the lack of contribution that the current government has made to the people of Longman and the people of Australia generally. There are many misleading, untrue statements and downright lies made in this place, and firstly I would like to correct the record on one that has been bandied around, and that is the untruthful statement, $1 trillion of coalition debt. Deputy Speaker, the facts are these. Fact 1, the debt as at April 2022, just before the federal election, was $885.5 billion, which is not $1 trillion. So by saying this, Labor are simply lying. Fact 2, almost two-thirds of the debt was baked in from the previous Labor government when the coalition assumed office in 2013. Fact 3, up until the pandemic, the debt was $534.4 billion in March 2019, and the pandemic measures increased the debt to $885.5 billion in April 2022, which again is not $1 trillion. Now, on this point, I want to point out that every person I speak to in the street agrees that money had to be spent over and above the normal during the pandemic. Now, we can debate how much that should have been and how much of it and how it was spent, but the bottom line is that extraordinary times call for extraordinary measures, and the Australians I speak to understand and accept that fact. Let me point out as well that Labor supported all these measures and in fact wanted additional measures and spending that would have added an extra $81 billion to the deficit. It smacks with absolute hypocrisy to criticise the debt after you supported it in opposition, and in fact you said it didn't go far enough. But, Deputy Speaker, what else would you expect? Longman is one of Australia's fastest growing communities, with just over 25,000 people moving to the area since I was first elected to the seat just over 4 years ago. And the projection is that Longman will grow by at least 100,000 people in the next 15 to 20 years. The coalition government recognised this, and we proudly invested in the infrastructure that the community so desperately needs now and will need in the future. Infrastructure like the $150 million overpass at New Settlement Road in Narangba, the $660 million upgrade to the Bruce Highway, where a third lane is being added between the Bribie Island Road exit and Steve Irwin Way, $30 million for Bribie Island Road, $15.2 million for the Diagula Highway, as well as numerous upgrades to local roads in partnership with the Moreton Bay Regional Council, including $320,000 for Williamberry Drive in Caboolture South, $915,000 for upgrades around Gympie Road, starting at Alma Road and Marsman Road in Dacabin, $2 million for upgrades to McKean Street in Caboolture, just to mention a few. I was also proud that through advocating with ministers and regular meetings with telcos, the people of Longman, thanks to the previous coalition government, now have an additional 8 now operational mobile towers, plus 3 more underway under the PUMP program. This is in contrast to the 0 delivered for the Longman community under the previous Labor government. One of the highlights for me was being involved in the development of the peri-urban mobile tower program, which allowed partial funding by the Commonwealth for mobile phone towers in those communities around the country like Longman, where the city meets the bush and the population density is too low for telcos to invest in infrastructure, but too populated to receive regional black spot funding. Under this program, Longman received approval for 3 towers, located in Belmere and Caboolture South. Sadly, the contracts were not prepared by the department before we entered caretaker mode before the last election, and my information tells me that at this moment, over 12 months since the election, that the sign-off from the minister is still yet to occur. This has delayed these much-needed towers for at least another 12 months, which is simply not good enough. The previous government also partnered with the local council, community groups, sporting clubs and the like for smaller but just as important projects. Under such programs as the Stronger Community Grants Program, Capital Grants Program, Bushfire Recovery for Wildlife and Habitat Community Grants Program, Muster Grants Program, Volunteer Grants, Powering Communities, Building Better Regions Fund, Safer Communities Fund, Roads to Recovery Fund, Community Development Grants Program and Regionalisation Fund Program, which delivered practical items such as everything from new carpets for sporting clubs to solar panels for community halls to petrol vouchers for volunteers. They funded programs for youth at risk and so much more. In all, the community of Longman received over $23 million for 238 projects. Sadly, this government has made the decision to scrap the Community Development Grants Program and Regionalisation Fund Program, which means these organisations that rely on government support will no longer receive that support in tough times when these groups so desperately need them. I waited with anticipation on budget night and the ensuing days to find out when the election commitments that Labor made during the election would be delivered for the Longman community. There was a $3 million promise of a new clubhouse for the Caboolture Snakes Rugby League, $3 million for the new clubhouse at the Narangba Eagles Football Club, $3 million for the water park at Centenary Lakes, $300,000 for lights at the Narangba Demons Baseball, as well as road projects totalling $589 million, which included increasing the Bruce Highway from 6 to 8 lanes between Anzac Avenue and Yeoman Road. Not a mention in the budget, just another broken Labor promise to go along with the other broken promises of $275 reduction in power prices, cheaper mortgages under a Labor government, yet there have been 10 interest rate rises in just the first 12 months. Under Labor, families will be better off. There'll be a lift in real wages, not gross wages, real wages, the measure that actually matters. A 24/7 nurse in every aged care facility, all lies, never happened. No changes to super, broken promise again. The list goes on and on. How can Australians ever trust this Labor government? They promise a lot and they deliver nothing. They can't even keep their election promises.
I thank the member for Longman. The question is that the bill now be